Welcome back to Property Untangled with our fantastic guest today. And thanks for accepting my offer to come on, Tony.
Yes, pleasure.
Tony Cook from HPC these days, but had a plethora of companies that you've owned and worked at over the last 30 years.
There's been a few, yeah. It was settled for a good period, but then a period of madness, and back to being settled again, which is nice.
Good. So take me back to 1996, was it? I was just starting school. What were you doing?
Well, I'd left the computing industry and a chance meeting with a lady who owned an estate agency on Chandler's Avenue, which was Marlborough, and an opportunity to go and change direction and do something within that business. I think it started off with setting up some PCs and turned into...
So you worked in IT then before property
altogether,
right?
Yeah, for about 11 years. I'm 100 years old.
Was that an industry back then? I suppose it was just kicking off, was it?
It was. I was working in mainframe computing, which was kind of like processing payrolls and doing that kind of thing. And the whole industry was changing to smaller machines, lots to learn, which was my cue to get out.
Right, yeah.
No, but seriously, it was kind of like an opportunity that just came at the right time. And property was something which I'd kind of been interested in, and bought a flat on the marina quite early doors and got caught in a recession and had a bit of an insight into it from that point of view.
So Marlborough Estate Agents was already in business at this point?
Yeah, established in 1980.
Right.
So it'd been around a while.
Right.
It was quite well known in the area. But was mainly focused on lettings and property management. Okay. And the angle was to come and do more with sales, which was the way it turned out. But I was blessed in having the opportunity to do every role within the business. So from lettings to property management and answering the phone, even to get a real handle on what other people were experiencing and how their days were. So when it came to later on in the journey, having that kind of empathy that goes with understanding everybody's challenges, so that was really helpful.
So you started out working there, I assume?
Yeah.
As what, just a general manager and sales direction?
Yeah, it just started off as a lettings kind of trainee, I suppose, and then worked through all of the roles until became the business manager later on, and then got the opportunity to buy the business in 2014. So it was a bit of a roller coaster.
You thought I'll just go for it and see how it goes, and how did it go?
The ownership
of the business, as opposed to working there.
It went okay for a while, but then I realised that I wasn't really cut out for it. Some people are, some people aren't. The job itself was great, but the responsibilities and the headaches that come with the personnel, with the recruitment and all these other things that go with business ownership wasn't really for me. And it put stresses on. And
how did you find the relationship between tenants and landlords? Because that's something that I think we're a bit crazy for doing. It's probably one of the most complex relationships in society is the renter and the landlord. And we plonk ourselves right in the middle and say, we'll deal with all the aggro when it goes wrong. And when it goes right, no one ever says anything. So how was that for you, that specific relationship management?
That was kind of one of my favourite bits, because there's a common misconception that landlords and tenants should be in opposition, whereas I think we have a situation where the landlord's trying to achieve something very definite over time, and the tenants need somewhere nice to live. So I saw our role really as keeping the two things together, producing and providing nice homes for tenants, whilst at the same time looking after the landlord's best interests. And I think that was something that we achieved quite well. And very rarely did we have any kind of contention between the two. I can think of maybe going to court once or twice in a 25-year period. So
if you manage the relationship effectively,
exactly
it can be done.
right,
And one of the most sort of critical times when this relationship goes wrong is when a landlord says, sorry, but I need to increase the rent a little bit. Is that a decision that, because again, in the media, we see a lot that agents are driving the price of rents up all the time because they've got a percentage benefit of that increase. Is that the case in your experience, or do you think somebody else is driving that?
I think that there's an obligation on the part of the agent to make a landlord aware of the market values, the market prices, but also because of that relationship that agents have with the tenants, and they understand their situation. I think it's incumbent on the agent as well to make the landlord understand that, so to set the level of rent so that it's affordable and so that everybody's getting a fair deal without anybody, you know, maybe losing out and getting above themselves. Yeah, there's nothing better than if you've got a great tenant and they're set up nicely and the kids are at the local schools, and I'm really sensitive to shaking that tree, you know, making the environment such that they can't stay there.
And the flip side of it is that there's so many landlords out there that I deal with, and you will have dealt with as well, who actually really care about the affordability level of the property, care about the tenant situation, and they don't want to, even when it comes to selling the property, the landlord can be in a situation where they actually need to sell this property, but they're so worried about not how much money they're going to get or what they're going to lose when they come to sell it, if that's the case, but is the tenant going to be there, or are they going to lose their family home? The kids are in the local school, you know.
I couldn't agree more. It's a situation that's going to happen more and more. I think as landlords decide that they want to maybe divest and exit, and that relationship that's already been established with a tenant then becomes even more important, because it's very hard to sell a tenanted property without the tenant's cooperation. And that cooperation comes with goodwill, and that goodwill is established over time. So certainly it's the agent's job to maintain that, and really to always have the tenant's best interests at heart as well as the landlord's, I think.
I suppose that comes on quite nicely to what you're doing now as well. So the company you're working with now, no doubt Louise will be watching this. Fantastic boss. You've gone in there to look at the investment sales side of things, which is kind of in line with what you're talking about here. It's to manage the sale of tenanted properties. How has that been going, and what's it?
It goes well. We've got, I think because Louise in the past has taken such care about finding tenants who are suited to the properties that they're in, they can afford to live there. There's very little or very few problems that go with these tenanted houses, and it makes that whole process much easier because the tenants trust her. The landlords know that she's safeguarding their best interests, and the whole thing has worked quite smoothly. We get very few problems. I am continually trying to talk landlords out of issuing notices to make tenants have to leave, because I just don't think it's necessary the majority of the time. There's a lot of misinformation. If you Google how much money will I lose if I sell my property tenanted, you know, maybe the suggestion would be that you'd lose 30% of the market value of your house. I think if it's handled correctly and the benefits of selling a tenanted property put across to a prospective buyer, there's just no need. And everybody can win. And ultimately, that's my goal in doing the job that I do, is to make sure that everybody feels as if they're won at the end of the day.
Yeah, there is a buzz out of tenants staying in situ and being able to enjoy their home on an ongoing basis. A landlord exiting, a landlord coming in, everybody's a winner. Nobody's had to lose their home. Nobody's had a void period to deal with when it comes to selling it. Somebody's got their money invested. There is a buzz to that, isn't there? Because that's similar to what we do here as well.
It's totally the way forward, and there's a real buzz. And I think if you can go home at the end of the day knowing that you've rescued a tenancy, but you've also got a reasonable deal for the seller and the buyer's done okay as well, they've got a great tenant from day one. They've got rental coming in. And probably as important to the buyer is the fact that that tenant has a track record. So you know that they've achieved their goal. They've bought a good property with a decent tenant and they've paid a fair price. So
what's it like working in the same office that you used to run your business out of, and now going in under a different banner and not being in charge? I guess it must be a different dynamic altogether. How's that been?
I thought it'd feel strange, and it felt like going out and buying a paper and coming back again. Yeah, it was cool. It was like walking back in, and because the team that we have there was so welcoming, and kind of like I didn't feel as if I was going into a setup where I'm trying to kind of shoehorn my way in. It was kind of like big hugs, open arms, and come back home, and just without that responsibility that
and I bet you get some
ground me down, you know.
Yeah, well, I bet you'll have some familiar faces popping in as well. What you to come and see you, and knowing that you're there now, and that.
I don't let on that I went anywhere.
Yeah,
it's just like a continuation. It's wonderful, really, and in that sense, and being back on the patch and seeing the same faces, but having had the experience of being somewhere else for a couple of years or 3, which was valuable, and I'd like to come on to that because that was something which was a real learning curve and was necessary probably to get a full appreciation of what we have a chance at.
Right, yeah. What do you mean, in what sense do you mean that? Just...
Well, when the business was moved on, it was sold to Line Property, to Sam Humphreys, who was a bit of a star from beginning to end because he recognised the challenges that our business faced and integrated that into a bigger business that was Line. And I had the opportunity to work there for a couple of years in a completely different organisation that was much more like yours, bigger, much more marketing and a different emphasis. But to be able to establish a sales team in a rental business and have a free reign was a real gift and was something which kind of played to my strengths in setting up a sales platform and the systems and creating a team. And that was great.
And also having virtually guaranteed leads coming through off the rental portfolio, I assume.
Yeah, it was a nice setup and I enjoyed it for the period that it lasted,
Well, that brings me on quite nicely, actually, because one of the other things that you probably know I'm quite a big advocate of is agents working together rather than against each other within our industry, particularly locally and particularly the non-corporate agents, because there's quite a few out there that are very centralised national companies, maybe franchises, that they kind of look down on us, the rest of us, in my opinion. And I think the rest of us kind of need to work a little bit more closely together to maybe specialise and have niches. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think I'm on the right track or do you think I'm way off?
I think one thing that you've done amazingly well, along with some of the younger entrants into the industry, if I'm putting it that way, is recognise that it's not a competition and that it's not something which you all need to cut each other's throats. It's something which, if you all share and you recognise the things that you're good at and the things that maybe you're not so good at, then you can all achieve the goals better and with a better outcome for tenants and landlords, I think.
And actually for the industry as a whole, because we know that the general public look down a little bit on agents, particularly estate agents, but agents in general, as to some of the practices and stuff. But if we can all get behind a specific niche and do it properly and do it right and fair, you'd like to think that we can raise the standard and the opinion of everybody else.
Totally. I think the industry reputation has been well earned over a long period of time. So anything that can redress that and can give the general public more faith in what we do and a greater trust can only be good. And like I said, I think the new entrants into the market do that amazingly well.
And there's fewer and fewer all the time, isn't there? You've probably noticed in your 30 years that there's less people starting up now.
Less people starting up. There's more, dare I say, there's more businesses buying other businesses, Spencer.
Yeah, a lot more, yeah. What are you talking about there?
But which is a great thing as well, because some, in difficult times especially, the smaller agents have got to struggle because they've, the legislation, don't need to tell you about that, and the changing work conditions. You don't need a quiet spell for very long before it starts to bite. So you need to be robust. So the work that you're doing in bringing more security to the staff that work in smaller agents that might otherwise struggle, can only be applauded.
And I think the marketing as well is a big part of this. And I know you've worked amongst a good company in Lime, in the sense that they know how to market their business very well, and in HPC as well. And I assume you recognise the value and importance of that these days. And if you're not up to scratch with that side of things, then you can quite easily fall behind.
You've got to embrace it now, and I think the days of kind of resisting it and thinking it's not important, I think you're going to come unstuck if you carry on too far down that tack. I think there's a blend of personal service and not being entirely technology focused to the point where you take people out of the equation. I've kind of seen that firsthand in one environment, but then, these things work together and the marketing, the technology, advertising, social media, all of that, it's all changed so markedly, but you need to keep on top of it or you get left behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at HPC now, I think maybe punching a little bit above our weight in that respect, because we've recognised the importance of that angle and keeping it personal and making it so that people get an indication or an idea of who they're going to be working with before you go knock on the door. And I think that's a good...
Very important angle. So just to speak about sales specifically then, if someone was watching this, for example, and was thinking, as we've discussed, not many people are setting up estate agencies, but quite fancy having a go at it myself, and they've got you here who's taken one on and run an estate agency and worked in the industry for a long time. What would you say was the best way to hit the market from the off? I know some agents will potentially go out there and overvalue properties to win listings and get boards up, be quite dog-eat-dog in the sense that you might get leaflets through doors of existing properties for sale saying, noticed it's been on the market for so long. How would you go about it to do it in a way that's not intrusive and not... Do you know what I mean?
I think, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's, to be a startup today, really tricky. Paul Green, who I worked with for a little while, you know, sat out there with an iPad and went around Victoria Dock and leaflets and let people know he was there. And I think that probably worked in the day. You probably struggle with that approach now. I think to establish a niche, to find a corner of the market that you're going to specialise in and become, I hate this word, but become the expert in that area, you know, and let people know what you're about, who you are and what you can do.
So is it a geographical area or is it an area of service?
Yeah. No, don't try and be everything to all people because it's very hard to, especially spread yourself that thin when you first begin. But to establish a little corner of the market that you can focus on and try and own that, and hopefully that gets a bit broader and spreads. But don't overcommit. You know, don't ramp your expenses up day one because it's going to be a while. If you sell your first house after a week, it's still probably going to be 4 months before you get paid.
Exactly. That's
so,
at least.
You've got a little while before you start seeing the benefit.
What do you think about LinkedIn as a tool for that, expressing knowledge and showing your
free marketing for sure? Yeah, let's have more of that, and social media generally. I think if you angle that the right way and you can let people know the message, keep it consistent, and that's wonderful. Yeah, because your portals and certainly if there's any hard copy advertising still goes on, that'll sap your strength.
Massively. What do you think of people who say, and I've been guilty of saying this myself in the past, a property is only worth what someone's prepared to pay for it? So you've never heard that before? So I'm assuming you're to set the scene, you're with a client who you valued the property and you've maybe put a price where you think this is what I think it's worth, and the client said that to you. What's your perception of that?
I think it's quite an old-fashioned view and a bit of a cliche. And it's becoming more and more apparent that lenders have a different view on what a property is worth to sellers and buyers have, especially when the market's tricky and they're looking to ensure that they've got some integrity to the investment that they're lending on. So really, I think the lenders more decide what a property is worth in the amount that they'll agree to lend against. So it's a romantic tale to think, wrong word, but it's to think that we both agree that I can buy a house for a certain amount and that's what it goes through at.
It's quite an emotive process, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
If somebody really wants to buy something and they really want to live somewhere in a certain location or a certain house and it's perfect for the family or whatever it might be, they might want to pay something for it, but unfortunately if they're mortgaging then and they've only got a finite amount of money as a deposit, it's up to the bank really as to whether they want to.
And in a marketplace like that, just to follow on from that point, there's not a whole lot of properties out there. So if you find the one you want and it's in the right place and the kids' school's around the corner and mum's across the road, you know, and you've got a babysitter right there, you'd maybe be tempted to overpay, and that is not an option open to you if the bank don't agree with your assessment of the value.
I suppose from an agent's perspective on that as well, it can be quite frustrating because you might have a vendor who wants a price for the property, a buyer who's prepared to pay it, but a bank that's not prepared to lend the money on it. So it actually creates a bit of a frustrating situation, doesn't it?
It's a frustrating situation, but it's a challenge. And I think one of the benefits of using an agent's or an agency who've been around for a while is that you can overcome it. And it sometimes means lowering people's expectations, the seller's expectations as to what they might achieve, but also making a buyer realise that maybe they're going to have to find a bit of extra money from somewhere if they want that house badly enough. So all the time we're trying to build little bridges and bring two people together who might have a different or a slightly different view based upon what the bank have told them. There's some skill that goes with that.
I'm going to say that's the skill of a good agent.
Experience helps, you know, and if you've been in that situation before and you've seen it a few times, there are methods that you can use that will keep everyone happy.
What would you say, I'm putting you on the spot a bit here, you might not have thought about this one, but what would you say was a career highlight for you? Is there anything that stands out where you think, you know, that was a real good bit of business, or that was, I'm really happy with how that turned out? Or
I think not so much from a personal, well, maybe from a personal perspective. I always enjoyed it when apprentices came to join us and finding a way of maximising their potential so that they reached a point where they could then move on and go and either take the next step with us or go somewhere else. So maybe it's not so much of personal. Obviously buying the business, that was great because it was a culmination of a lot of hard work. But I see it more in how we managed to develop others and people who maybe didn't come from the best background or maybe weren't given a chance somewhere else and really got to max out on what they were able to achieve with us. I'd say that's probably one of the best highlights.
And what about a low point? Have you had a low point where you thought, oh,
God, listen to the podcast.
How many thousands of low points have you had?
I think when I left Line, it was to leave for the perfect job.
Right.
And I looked at the work, I looked at the job and thought, right, we're going to make homes more efficient.
Right.
We're going to save people a lot of money. I can use all the contacts that I've got in property to make that work. And it was a disaster.
Right.
Because I walked into it thinking that the learning process to do something totally different from what I was doing would be quite straightforward and easy. You find a lot out about yourself then.
Yeah.
Because you're working in a totally different environment, and it was quite chaotic at times, and there were very tight time frames on some of the work. Didn't really know what I was doing, and it kind of like humbled me to the core.
Right.
So it was a low point at the time, but low story, okay. We're in the Bridgehead Park building, which was in Hesel, and across the corridor from my building, where we were, was a guy called Dan Cooper, who you know.
Yes, I do.
And James Green, who's doing mortgages.
Yep.
I'd find any reason to leave my desk to go and nestle away in the comfort blanket of their office to talk about property, right? Because I really didn't know what I was doing in the job that I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
So
very honest, obviously.
A few weeks in, and I'm recognising I'm totally out of my depth. Nothing to do with the guys that are employing me because they had some faith in my ability to be able to learn this stuff. But I soon realised that I was in too deep and that things weren't really going the right way. So I got a call from Louise, HPC, and I was actually touting for a bit of business to go and see some of her clients to maybe do some energy improvement work there. And she just said, "Are you missing it?" I said, "Missing what?" She said, "Property. You know, you've done it for all that time." I said, "No." And then about 10 minutes later, back on the phone, "Should I have a coffee?"
Yeah, that was it.
And that was it, yeah, and that was it. So it was that realisation that really I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, and learning was more difficult than I thought it would be, and changing industry at 55 was really a bad idea.
Right. There's something I know about you from a distance is that you are passionate about the environment and also making properties as energy efficient as possible. So I'm assuming here, but are you getting involved in that side of things with the impending EPC changes for letting agents and landlords? Is that something you're looking at with HPC?
It's something which we'll develop into, definitely, because I think that it's an area which maybe isn't being taken seriously enough right now. Certainly buyers who are switched on are considering it in their decision to buy, but there's some work to do. I'm not convinced, having been in that industry for a short while, that the infrastructure's there to do the work. That's the biggest worry, is that if
the retrofit work to get them up to standard.
Exactly. Yeah. So if a million landlords decide tomorrow to all do this work, then I don't know what's going to happen because
there isn't the people to do it, isn't there?
There aren't the people to do it.
So let alone the money.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
The timeframes that have been set to do the work within, I think, are probably a little bit unrealistic, and there needs to be some more thinking around that. But certainly, I'd love to help anyone that wants to make those improvements and to do it in a way that's the most cost efficient and beneficial.
Good. So, Tony, you're the man to speak to if somebody's got an investment property they want to sell or maybe get into the market. You can speak to us as well, by the way. But Tony's also very capable.
I don't want to step on your toes.
No,
but for sure.
We're not stepping on toes. We're all friends, don't we?
Likewise, if you've got people that want a bit of advice on EPCs and you don't feel up to it, Spencer, just...
Exactly, yeah. Well, this is what it's all about. You know, if you've got a skill set and we haven't, that's where we want to be.
Beautiful. It's a collaboration.
Trading business, so... we really appreciate you coming in, Tony. I know you've come up to Beverley today to have a chat to me and just share your views and opinions on the industry. And thanks again for coming in.
I'm so grateful, and a shout out to what you've done here, because I've had a brief tour of the office and it's the most amazing place I've ever seen that does property. And that's from humble beginnings.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, we've known each other from the start, and the way that you do the work, you know, is kind of representative of how I tried to do it as well. So
yeah, good. Thanks very much, Tony. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and that concludes the episode for today. Thanks for tuning in, and please subscribe and like our video because it helps more people see it. We're trying to get up over 100 people to watch potentially. So, thanks very much.